free hand in how this is done, how this recovery to be done. Since there is another risk on the horizon, it's of course, everybody knows climate change. This means that we need low carbon resilient, climate resilient investment if we are to enjoy sustainable growth. It will take decades to re-engineer our cities and energy and transportation infrastructure. So we need to get started immediately, start now to limit these future climate risks. Unlike the financial crisis, we do not have any climate bailout option. Nobody could come to rescue us from the outside of the earth. The risks of carbon-intensive investment are now very, very significant to ignore. While investors should be aware of the opportunity associated with green investments, and I will touch on this issue later, there is also increasing attention allocated to the risks from failing to account for climate change in investment portfolio. Climate change and our policy response to it can have significant implications for finance and investment, as well as physical and liability risks from climate impacts. The transition to low-carbon economy itself may pose financial risks from the repricing of assets. Some assets goes up, its price goes up, others down. The low-carbon transition could render the vast majority of fossil fuel reserves, as you know, stranded assets, oil, gas, and coal, that will be literally unburnable without widespread deployment of technologies such as CCS. Investments in expensive new fields that were dependent on oil price staying north of $80 per barrel have been stranded, sometimes halted or deferred. We are seeing stranded assets at the moment in oil, coal, and even brand new natural gas plants in Europe. The drivers of these stranded assets are economic, technological, and policy related. But decarbonization of portfolios and divestment from carbon-intensive assets, it is happening. It is happening among the world investors at their own initiative as well. A growing list of investors have actually divested from fossil fuels like coal and oil sands, including, naming quite a few, American University, Stanford, famous Norway's sovereign wealth fund, Global, Allianz and AXA, the largest insurance company in Germany and France. 544 institutions, I counted before the summer, 544 institutions with a combined value of $3.4 trillion have committed to divesting partially, usually on coal, or totally from fossil fuels. For investors to integrate climate-related opportunities and risks in their decision-making, what to be done in making investment or divesting. What is essential? Reliable disclosure. Reliable disclosure of information is really, really essential. The Financial Stability Board established last December an industry-led task force on climate-related financial disclosures. We call it TFCD, chaired by Michael Bloomberg, former New York City mayor. The OECD, my institution, is committed to support this task force. Increased attention to climate-related financial disclosure. It will definitely become a mainstream issue for many in this room. A recent OECD CDSP report analyzes mandatory climate disclosure schemes in G20 countries. The report shows 15 countries out of G20 countries. 15 countries mandate companies to disclose some climate-related information. It is really, really encouraging. But looking at the content, substance, there is a significant difference among these schemes, country by country, leading to a multiplicity of reporting requirements and inconsistency in the quantity, quality, and comparability of information. This is quite essential for making investment decisions. The FSB task force is now working to develop voluntary, not compulsory, voluntary but consistent climate-related disclosures for use by companies in providing information to their investors, lenders, insurers, and other stakeholders. This task force will have a second plenary meeting next week in Paris, and they are expected to report back to us the final report the forthcoming December. Another area where disclosure is relevant is that of institutional investment governance, or fiduciary duty, in a better known term for Anglo-Saxon people. There is increasing attention to the need for fiduciaries to take climate risk factors into consideration in their investment decision for their clients, not just for environmental and ethical reasons, but from a financial viewpoint. However, only a small number, a minority of institutional investors, systemically integrate environmental, social, and governance factors, ESG factors, into their governance. Now, another side of equation, supply side of green finance, or financing, how to finance a low carbon transition. Unestimated, $93 trillion will be needed in transport, energy, and water investment by 2030, another 15 years, to meet global infrastructure needs while ensuring a low carbon transition. $93 trillion is seemingly a huge number, but the increase in cost, 93 compared to the cost relative to business as usual, non-green investment costs, is just a difference is only 4.5%. And factoring in operating savings could make it even less costly than business as usual. So seeking green investment is not so much more expensive than business as usual costs. Globally, as you know, shortage of capital is not a binding factor. Given the huge amount of assets, for example, held by institutional investors, insurance companies, pension funds, Norway's sovereign wealth fund, etc., and also in capital markets. To give you a sense of perspective and scale, to meet a 2-degree scenario, 15 years from now, we will need to invest $2.3 trillion per year in the EU, US, China, and Japan, major four markets, just in the renewable, energy efficiency, and low emission vehicle sectors. $2.3 trillion in four major markets per year. Compare this with $19 trillion of new bond issuance that occurred 2 years ago in those same markets. This suggests that low carbon investment will be an important element of total investment, but it doesn't need to dominate. No need to dominate all investment. So the low carbon transition is an important investment opportunity, but it wouldn't happen fast enough on its own. We need a speed. Without concerted and consistent climate policies, fossil fuels will remain the energy fuel of choice. Pricing carbon, of course, we need to price carbon emission. Pricing carbon is an important prerequisite, but it is not enough on its own to drive the structural changes and unclench the carbon fist. That is, even if carbon were sufficiently priced, and which is not the case. We calculated the combined price signal on CO2 emission from energy use, resulting from explicit carbon taxes in some countries, tradable permit prices in other countries, and specific taxes on energy use, gasoline tax, diesel, oil tax, etc. Combining those kind of energy taxation, carbon taxation. We call it effective carbon rate. We are about to present our findings in an OECD publication, which provide evidence that the effective price on carbon is, in most cases, quite insufficient in both coverage and price level. Across 41 OECD and G20 countries, 60% of carbon emission, 60% of carbon emission from energy use are totally unpriced. Only road transport fuel has universally high effective carbon rates due to the widespread use of excise tax on fuel. But even here, the application of transport fuel taxes is inconsistent across OECD and G20 countries. So we have many things to be done. Beyond carbon pricing, we need to completely reorganize policies to eliminate many policy misalignments that stand in the way of more effective and less costly transition to a low carbon economy. We made up a report with a title Aligning Policies for Low Carbon Economy last year, which is still one of the most popular OECD report. It is produced jointly with our sister institution, IEA, NEA, and International Transportation Forum. It is designed to help members, non-member countries, to carefully review all their policies to ensure that there are no frictions, unintended consequences, or even objective signals that are in conflict with climate action. So we are appealing member countries, non-member countries, to check all the policy areas, whether other ministries have made a misaligned policy choice. So this is not an issue of Ministry of Environment only. I am urging my home country, Japan's Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Trade, they should check their own policies with our climate objectives. A key consideration for meeting future green investment needs is governments to foster the development of viable investment channels that are sustainable, suitable for institutional investors who manage also $93 trillion in OECD countries. Government policy plays a central role in influencing how this private capital can be mobilized and shifted. And it will only be green if investment landscape is supportive. As I mentioned earlier, coherent climate policies and good framework conditions for investment are essential. Equally vital are measures to reduce financial risk and facilitate transition. We checked how much institutional investors make on a direct investment in projects, green projects. We have made a report set our investment channels alongside the ways in which government can reduce risks and facilitate transactions, and it provides these recommendations to policymakers. One option to form public green investment, one option to facilitate the investment is Public Green Investment Bank. Over a dozen national and subnational governments have already created green banks. And governments will need to consider how they engage the global bond markets in the low carbon economies.
Mr. Tamaki, I'm sorry to stop you, but we're out of time, unfortunately.
Okay. I'm going to speak about green bond developments, and this is, not necessarily in Europe and Europe and United States, but also China is a quite important player in issuance of green bonds.
I mean, we can
So,
also come to green bonds in the debate
Yes.
as well.
If the time allows, I will speak about that. Thank you.
Okay,
for
thank you so
listening.
much. And that was a fascinating speech there, Mr. Tamaki. I was particularly taken by the idea of there is no bailout for climate change, and that's something we may come back to in the debate. Next up, a man who needs no introduction. It's European Environment Commissioner Comuna Vella. Mr. Vella, please take the stand.
Thank you very much, James, and I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the Slovak presidency for organizing such a well-organized conference. And so, good afternoon to all, and welcome to the session on financing and investments for a greener economy. I am certain that you have heard a lot today about the green economy and also about the circular economy, including from my colleague President Maros Sefcovic this morning. Why? Because one cannot simply talk about the green economy and not talk about the circular economy. And on the circular economy, the European Commission is keen, it is very, very keen to help make it happen in reality in Europe by 2030, with legislation, with pull and push measure, and of course with financing. So I am very pleased to speak about the green economy financing and investment. This is a topic to which, together with a number of my colleagues, I have devoted quite some attention to this year. And it is good to see that the Slovak presidency also attaches an equally great importance to this topic. One thing has become evident in recent years: the need for the environmental community to work together with the investment community in its widest sense to ensure that we deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals, that we deliver on the Paris Agreement on climate change, that we deliver on the transition to resource-efficient circular economies, halting biodiversity loss, etc. Also, the G20 heads of states at their summit only 2 days ago meant just that when they endorsed the concept of green finance. Green finance is not a one-way relationship in which the green economy is simply asking for money. It is as much about highlighting opportunities and risks for the financial system as well. Circular economy is the perfect example of this interdependence and a key area where positive synergies should take place. Closing the loops on product and material cycles is needed not only to reduce the environmental impacts of production and consumption, but even more so to save precious resources, to provide quality recycled materials to industry, and to improve the resilience of our economy to international crises. The interdependence needs to extend to the financial sector as well. The green circular economy is an insurance policy of sorts of investments. Today, a business which is not sustainable and which is not climate-proof has got an expiry date on it and makes for poor, very poor returns. For all of these reasons, we choose to dedicate this year's Green Week in early June to the topic Investing for a Greener Future, where more than 150,000 people from across the globe took their time to go to one of the more than 182 Green Week partner events in more than 30 countries, and where hundreds of thousands got really engaged online. The take-home message from the Green Week was that green investments pay dividends. They literally pay dividends. And here are the facts. Investing in resource-efficient production processes cuts costs for European businesses and, in turn, improves their competitiveness. The circular economy agenda, with a switch to products that are used and reused and do not deplete the Earth's natural resources, could bring savings of up to some 600 billion euros for EU businesses, whilst at the same time reducing the annual greenhouse gas emissions by some 2 to 4%. Green industries grew by more than 50% in the European Union between the year 2000 and the year 2011, and jobs in environmental goods and services increased from almost 3 million, to be exact 2.9 million, to 4.3 million between the year 2000 and the year 2012. There are many more of these success stories out there. Investment in green cities, creating jobs, creating a healthy environment, and creating a better quality of life, making cities greener and more livable. The winners of the European Green Capital Award and the European Green Leaf Award are models for the future. The urban agenda of the European Union, established through the Pact of Amsterdam, which was adopted on the 30th of May, will help the European Union deliver on sustainable cities and sustainable communities. For our countryside, investments in sustainable farming practices are fundamental. EU money invested in protecting nature and in improving agricultural practices pays off, saving money elsewhere. The Commission's LIFE funding programme is a key catalyst for this, as I could see this morning very, very close from here in the LIFE-funded Natura 2000 site of Devinska Kobila. Investments in a sustainable blue economy will ensure that our oceans are healthy and productive for the long term. The European Maritime and Fisheries Fund helps boost innovation, growth and jobs, also in the marine and in the maritime sectors. For present and future generations, the European Union leads the efforts for a sustainable world. We are committed to implementing the universal vision of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, both domestically in Europe as well as externally worldwide. We are committed to mobilize all available means and resources, including that from the private sector. We have made our response to the Sustainable Development Goals one of the priorities of the 2016 work programme. In the coming weeks, we will adopt a communication mapping how the European Union will contribute to reaching the SDGs. Later this year, the Commission will also present a proposal to revise the European Consensus on Development in the light of the SDGs and changing global trends. Key to meeting the SDGs will be to ensure that funding is directed to the right place. So how does the Commission support green investments? EFSI, the European Fund for Strategic Investments, is a major contribution. As already outlined by Vice President Maros, the Commission adopted a review of EFSI on the 1st of June. From the point of view of my portfolio, I am very pleased to see that 5% of the transactions so far are dedicated specifically to the environment and to resource efficiency, while many other projects, including in the areas of energy, also bring environmental benefits. We are working very hard to increase further the number of environmental projects funded under EFSI. The European Union has committed to spend at least 20% of its budget up to 2020 on climate action. EU regional and structural funds, LIFE integrated projects, and the EU Natural Capital Financing Facility are all additional sources of finance that will allow the public and the private sectors to invest in sustainable and in circular solutions. And we will do more. Work towards the financial facility for water innovation is currently underway, and the Commission is assessing a potential platform to bring together the European Investment Bank, national banks and others on financing circular economy projects and business models. We also need a financial system that supports sustainable development. The European Union is at the forefront of efforts to build this. And I'm referring to the Capital Market Union Action Plan, which also includes a clear commitment of the Commission to support and develop market-based initiatives to promote and increase finance for environmental and sustainable investments. Green bonds are in fact a great illustration that green and sustainable finance is growing fast. Back in 2010, this sector of the market was worth barely $4 billion. By the end of last year, by the end of 2015, $42 billion of green bonds had been issued. But there is only so much that can be achieved by public and institutional actors. The public sector can provide a clear and predictable regulatory framework with the right incentives for investors. But there is a strong role for the private sector in providing new technologies, business models, and investment opportunities across a variety of sectors to help scale up this transformation to green economy. Of course, we still face challenges in convincing people that going green is the future. But looking at recent development makes me very optimistic. Green financing is increasingly prominent in the international political arena. We heard from the UNEP inquiry about the silent revolution, efforts that are going on around the world in developed and developing countries to green financial systems in order to get to the financial system that we really need. Ladies and gentlemen, let me close on this positive note. There is change in the air. We have many distinguished panelists here today who no doubt will contribute concrete examples of these positive changes. The European Union wants to be at the forefront of this change. We want to be at the forefront of this green revolution. Thank you very much for being here and for listening.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Our next keynote is coming to us through video link. So I'll introduce Eric Solheim, the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme.
I just visited Latin America. In Costa Rica, all electricity was renewable in 2015. In Brazil and Uruguay, every tender to generate electricity was won by solar and wind last year. Remarkable. In Colombia and Peru, private finance helps thousands of small farmers out of poverty and into greener production. And of course, fortunately, South America is not alone. Here, right in the center of Europe, Germany is now powering entire days with renewable energy. The Energiewende is such a remarkable achievement for the world, inspiring people all over the planet. That one of the most industrialized economies on the planet is able to turn itself around due to leadership and green instinct from the political environment. Thank you, Germany. You are leading the way. And around the world, solar and wind for the first time last year did outstrip coal and gas as the investment of choice. Again, no one thought it possible until very, very recently. The transition to an inclusive green economy is not a fantasy of the future, it's something definitely underway. So on the agenda of the global powerhouses of the G7 and the G20, Germany will lead the G20 next year, and for sure they will take this further. The European Commission is providing strong leadership, and on a personal note, may I add, in these times of Brexit, if the European Union had not been invented a long time back, it would have been time to do it. We need the European Union, and we need the leadership you provide on global issues. Globally, 90 countries are using also fiscal reform to tackle climate change. This June, the wider Europe met in Batumi in Georgia, and there were over 100 pledges to the Green Economy Action Plan, including incentives for waste management, energy improvements, and new technology. There were suggestions for procurement criteria for key purchases with environmental impact. And of course, this meeting taking place in Bratislava, Slovakia's commitment to invest 2 billion euros in rail, renewables, and energy efficiency, adding to the German efforts. It shows that Europe is on the way, and so many others are taking this lead. This meeting is located right in the heart of Europe, in the beautiful historical capital of Slovakia, in Bratislava, and is really the perfect place to discuss the European economy at a crossroads. The issue is no longer whether a green economy could or should be developed. We know it can, we know it should. It's about how to speed up, how to scale up. I would have loved to be with you, but I also need to go to China, which at the same time is making progress, and Europe and China can lead together. These are exciting times. The green economy is really taking off at very different corners of the world. Last year, for instance, leading development banks, this figure just came out, leading development banks invested over 80 billion in tackling climate change, the banks and private sources combined. Now, can we build momentum? I think we all know the answer to that question. There was a very good slogan across the Atlantic quite recently. Yes, we can.
Well, even though I'm almost entirely certain Eric can't hear me, thank you, Eric. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists. They will come up stage, at which point they'll have a 5-minute impact statement. I'm afraid I'm going to have to be very tough on time because we are running a little bit behind. But our first panelist is Isla Cravey, who is Director and Head of Capital Markets at the European Investment Bank. And I have this horrible feeling I mispronounced your name. Okay, not. So please, come and take a seat. And your 5 minutes starts now.
Thank you. And thank you, first of all, for the invitation to this event, to the Slovak presidency. Now, I have quite a few things that I usually want to say about green bonds because I feel quite passionate about it, so I'll try to be very quick. I wanted to address just some, let's say, frequently asked questions or criticism or challenges to the green bond product per se. Why am I talking about it? Well, EIB is very involved in the green bond market, being a first issuer back in 2007. We are the largest issuer to date, and we are also very much involved in this Green Bond Principles, which is the voluntary coalition of issuers, investors, and banks participating in that market. And we try to create voluntary best practices, guidelines for green bond issuers. So that is my role in the green bond market. Now, some of the questions which one hears very, very frequently, for example, why have the Green Bond Principles not defined what actually is green or what is green enough to be financed with green bonds? And should we not have this before we start seriously engaging in the product? Well, one could, of course, argue that, but at the Green Bond Principles, we have rather taken the view that since, first of all, we are not the technical experts on the matter, there are much better experts in the world, and also because having a one global all-encompassing standard for everything related to environment and green is just a gigantic task for anybody to take on. We see it better for the GBP to become a kind of repository of information of various standards have been developed, in many cases sectorally. For example, we have BREEAM, who has developed energy efficient building standards. We have Climate Bond Initiatives, who is involved in quite a few sectors. We have also regional criteria, such as the Chinese ones. So we would like to be a repository of sort of serious standards, and then investors or even the official sector can then pick the ones that they want to support and that they want to follow. So otherwise, we feel that we would be losing much too much time, that in this case, the best might well be the enemy of the good. And that's why we should just accept this situation for a while. Another question that is raised is that one sees, particularly from the NGOs, that, well, there is no additionality, that all the projects so far that have been financed with green bonds would have been financed anyways. So what's the additionality? Well, I have to say that in this interest rate environment that we are, where all the interest rates almost globally are either very low or zero or negative, if there is a bankable project in any part of the world, green or any other color, it will find plenty of people willing to give finance to that project. This is not a problem. This is why this kind of additionality with the green bond doesn't exist, because we have a huge amount of liquidity out in the world looking for assets, any kind of assets. So if you have that assets, you have no shortage of finding the funds. But there is additionality, but this comes when you put yourself into another angle and look at things. I have heard, for example, the state of California say in a panel that after their first experience in green bond issuance, it was so positive that from now on, they look at the infrastructure investment that they want to do over the next couple of years. They prioritize those investments which can be financed through green bonds. So now these green investments, instead of being maybe in the last one in the queue, or maybe being financed in 5 years' time, they actually get priority nowadays. This is additionality to me. This is a very clear additionality. I have heard cities, one Nordic city, Gothenburg, I don't suppose they mind my mentioning it, who have said that they want their whole borrowing portfolio to be green in a few years' time. They invest only in green. Why? Because they want also to have this profile to attract young people, to attract startup companies and all the good that comes with it, such as good taxpayers. So there is additionality, but we have to look at this from the other way around. It is not just that we have a project which doesn't find any other financing, because surely nobody wants to suggest that green bonds should be financing unbankable projects, because in my view, that would destroy the product quicker than anything else could. Third point is about reporting. Now, when this green bonds started in 2007, what we thought was a good practice was to provide reporting for investors annually, that this is what we use the money for, sort of retroactively 1 year later. 2014, late in 2014, I started to hear investors talking about also impact reporting. Well, it's not enough for the investors anymore to know what did the money go to. We also want to know what was the impact of it, i.e. what is the greenhouse gas emissions saved, or any other metrics. And we started working on this. We worked finally together with 11 IFIs, and we published in 2015 March a format for impact reporting on renewable energy and energy efficiency. We further developed it so that it was applicable both for individual projects and portfolio approach. Within the green bond principles, it was also tested with other kind of issuers, and they found it good. But now we hear about ex post reporting, i.e. we don't want to know only the expectations, we also want to know what actually happened, where the windmills ever switched on, as some Yale academics wrote last year in the FT. Maybe I leave this
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to
this
stop
exciting
you.
question
But
for the panel.
reporting is something I suspect we'll come back to, because
Yes.
it's obviously such an important part
Yes.
of monitoring and everything else.
Indeed.
Thank you very much. Our next panelist, Annie Bursagel, Responsible Investment Advisor at the, I'm never going to be able to pronounce this, so I'll allow you to pronounce Kommunal Landspensionkasse?
Yes.
Perfect.
Very
I don't
close.
know why I was worried.
All right.
Okay, please come up, Annie.
Thank you. Yes, I know that's a mouthful. We just go by KLP. That's an easier way to go. So who is KLP? First, maybe I should explain that. We are the largest life insurance company in Norway. We manage the pension assets of Norwegian public sector employees in the municipalities and also in health organizations, the hospital systems. So about 2 years ago, in November 2014, we announced our new climate strategy. And our climate strategy has 3 pillars. So the first, and certainly the one that garnered the most media attention, was that we decided to divest from coal companies. I know Mr. Tamaki was referring to this a little bit earlier. So we would be listed in the number of institutions he mentioned. This is operationalized by companies that obtain 30% or more of their revenues from either coal mining or coal power production. And we did this about 6 months before the Sovereign Wealth Fund came to the same conclusion, and we'd like to think we played a little bit of a hand in that. So why coal? So coal, especially if we're thinking about lignite, brown coal, it's the most carbon-intensive source of energy out there. And it also contributes significantly to local air pollution and the health effects associated with that. When you see the smog in Beijing, that's not carbon we're looking at. The second part of our strategy is a unique partnership we have with Norfund, which is the Norwegian Development Fund. And KLP has a co-investment with Norfund, a 50-50 joint venture, where we invest in renewable energy capacity in developing countries. That includes a solar plant, or a solar park in South Africa. It includes a wind park in Kenya, solar park in Honduras. And why are we doing this? Well, it's kind of a unique public-private partnership, and we see that if we're taking our funds out of coal, well, where are the areas where coal would be the most obvious alternative source of fuel? And it's often in these developing countries. So we thought that was a way to make a bigger impact. And the third part of our strategy, is engagement with the companies in our portfolio. And we're invested in over 3,000 companies globally, and we've targeted specifically those that are the most carbon intensive in our portfolios, and especially those that don't even report their carbon emissions, and ask them, what is your climate strategy? Please explain this to us. How are you prepared to survive in a world where the Paris Agreement is implemented? And we also have engagement with particularly Norwegian companies to encourage them to report their emissions to CDP. Now, I'd like to finish with just musing a little bit on where I think the future of the investment community and climate finance is going. And thankfully, carbon footprinting was already discussed here, so I don't feel the need to really go into that so much, although I'm happy to take it up in the question and answer. But I would encourage everyone to recognize that this isn't about the fossil fuel industry alone. It is not limited to them. Certainly, there's a disproportionate impact on carbon emissions, but this is something that is really going to affect the broader market. And this kind of change, it can happen quickly, and it can be very dramatic. And just to illustrate this, if you look at the US stock exchange in 1900, which industries were the largest part of that exchange? The railroad sector, over 60%. What is it now? Less than 1%. So just because we see things the way they are today doesn't mean that's how they're going to be 20, 30, 40, 50 years into the future. And the kind of change that climate change, the kind of impact that climate change is going to have on the global economy, it's going to disrupt the market in ways that we haven't yet imagined. And the companies that figure this out early, these are the ones that are going to grow, and they're going to attract investment capital in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annie. Thank you. Stefania, are you here?
Yes.
Super. Okay. Stefania Rakulta, again, I'm afraid it's another name pronunciation mess up, but I'll just give up, I'm afraid, on your surname. So, is the Associate Director of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a presentation. I will try to go very quickly through it. and leave it for the audience to study it in more detail. I work for the EBRD as the Product and Business Development Associate Director in the Energy Efficiency and Climate Change Department. I'm afraid this is not working. Sorry. Should work, thank you. Just very quickly about the EBRD. It's a bank that has been set up in 1991. We are covering 36 countries of operation. We invest about 9 billion euros on an annually, and we are a commercial bank. We apply sound banking principles, but we also have a transition mandate. Out of the 36 countries, we are covering also 12 new member states. You will see from this graph that all of these countries have a high energy intensity, which is above the EU 28 average. But also these economies are confronted with high carbon intensity. Obviously, there is a driving factor for investment, and the EBRD plays a key role in these markets. I would like to remind you that our activities started in the early 90s, but more recently, especially for the last 10 years, we've gradually increased our focus on energy efficiency, renewables, water efficiency, resource efficiency. And last year, the board of directors approved a new strategy to accelerate investment in green economy transition. It's not just about financing. It's always a combination of technical assistance, concessional co-financing mobilized alongside our investment in projects, and everything is supported by policy dialogue. This is to recognize that investments in green economy face a wide variety of barriers. Therefore, we have to address them in an integrated way. We don't only work with large companies or large municipalities. We also try to reach the SMEs and the residential sector. For this purpose, we work with local commercial banks, with microfinance institutions. And I'm very pleased to tell you that we've so far invested in more than 1,000 projects, including credit lines through local banks. We've put more than 20 billion euros in the market, and we help save about 79 million tons of CO2 emissions every year. This is roughly the equivalent of the carbon emissions resulting for energy use in a country like Romania. Going forward, the bank has set itself a very ambitious target. We want to become almost like a green bank. We want by 2020, 40% of our business volume to go into green projects. In new member states, we've invested so far about 5 million euros. It's a wide variety of projects, a wide variety of technologies. We do everything from power networks, investment in smart grids, to, as I said, small investments like supporting residential energy efficiency in blocks of flats. One of the most successful instruments that we have, and that has worked very well in Slovakia, is the Sustainable Energy Finance Facility. As I said, we work through local banks, and together with the government, we had a series of successful programs. This is a case study from Slovakia, renovating blocks of flats, and we reached about 80,000 inhabitants with renovation measures. Another example, which is more of an innovative type of financing, is working with property funds. And we have a successful case in Poland. We work with these funds to make sure that the investments they do are sustainable and green, and that they build sustainability into the leasing contracts that they sign with the user of the buildings. In Bulgaria, an example of investment in manufacturing industry, recovering heat in glass production and improved combustion systems. I have an example from a credit line in Romania where we co-invest with ESCO companies in build, own, operate, transfer skills. I would leave you to study the rest of the examples, including municipal energy efficiency and biomass cogeneration. I just want to say that we are, and we would like to continue to be a partner for you and for governments to accelerate investments. As I say, and I finish here, we want 40% of our business volume to go into greening by 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Svetlana. I think what was really useful about certainly the last couple of slides when we're looking at building renovation is just because we're talking about investment and finance, this isn't just some high-level, confusing stock market stuff.
No.
This is actually on
Real
the ground,
projects.
people's homes, and making a real difference.
Yes.
Next up, Frida. Frida Krenin is Director of Corporate Sustainability at PGGM. I probably should have given you a bit more warning. So thank you.
Well,
But
shall I start? Because
please
5
do.
minutes is very short.
Yep, start.
So maybe first to start what PGGM is, because I think I'm the least known company here. But we manage the pensions of around 2.5 million people in the Netherlands, and we invest in them. So we do it through stock markets somehow, but still we try to do it responsible. And maybe to say something about how we do it responsible, but mainly if we look to a green economy, what is it? And I was very confused this morning, I must say. And it's not that we not go to a little bit more green economy as if we have a choice. I don't think we have a choice. So maybe the missing word in the title is not the transition, but it's managed transition. So there will be a transition, but is it an unmanaged transition? It will be very, very expensive. The managed transition, I think that's the key for today. But there are good opportunities, and we live in interesting times. And I can remember the day being the CSR person of PGGM, going to the asset managers, and then when they saw me, they got afraid because they say, well, here's the CSR guy, this costs us money. Because it was the days when we had a trade-off between financial return and ecological benefits in the end. And one of the things we see that is no longer the case. And investing is very easy. It's much more easy than your jobs. It's just saying avoid the losers and back the winners. And if we have companies with expiry dates, we don't need to invest in those companies. So even if you're not a responsible investor, you should look into the green economy. And secondly, the second, I say, positive development is that companies redefining their responsibilities. And for PGM, for instance, we say in 2020, our portfolio, which is 200 billion euros, should be 50% less carbon footprint. And we don't do it ourselves because we don't have a lot of carbon footprint ourselves, but we have to go to all the companies through engagement or through divesting, trying to get this goal of 50% less footprint. And the other target is that we want in 2020 quadruple our social impact investing from 5 billion to 20 billion, and we do it on specific themes. Maybe two positive kind of developments, but we have more challenges to overcome, and I will name three, and maybe we have a kind of agenda tomorrow. But the first one is redefining really the default, and I heard it's a few this morning is business as usual, but it's also policy as usual. And the frameworks and the regulatory frameworks are really, the linear is the default, the fossil is the default. And what's happening when a company comes to the market and they have a perfect circular solution, but then the linear competitor is favored. And in the European Investment Bank in December, there was a good conference on circular economy, and the big conclusion is governments are still subsidizing the linear economy. For instance, to give one example, the circular company has to pay for the reverse logistics, and the linear company, the consumer can just throw it away. I have different examples, and for instance, another one is on the tax system, because the circular economy is more labor intense, and the linear economy is more material intense. But what do? Something we have not enough from, materials, resources, we tax low, and something we have enough from, labor, we tax relatively high. So maybe we should think about switching that around. The second, next to redefining the default, is get more information on really what's happening, maybe the cost of inaction or the cost of slow action. And last year there was a brilliant report of the University of Cambridge the first time the macroeconomic analysis on what will happen if we have a 2-degree scenario or what we have, we do nothing scenario. And that's too expensive. And maybe if we need to invest now and we have the benefits later, that will not fit the horizons of politicians. But I think it will be when we see the price we have to pay and the next generations will have to pay. Thirdly, the third and last is what we call we need real cooperation. And sitting here together, talking together, that's a very good beginning. But I think we should work more and more together. I think companies, organizations like KLP, and we all have a different kind of perspective how we should really reorganize the economy, and we should work together and not get out of our silos. Because what I'm really missing today is not only colleagues of mine, but it's mainly where's the Ministry of Finance of your countries and where's the Ministry of Health of your countries. And when you come back home, the one thing that will lead again is GDP, and that's also from the 20th century.
Okay, thank you very much, Frida. Our last panelist is Arvid Moss, who's the Executive Vice President of Norsk Hydro. There you are, Arvid. And then, ladies and gentlemen, it'll be your turn.
Thank you for the invitation. And I guess I'm the only one from industry so far, so this will be the reality check whether we can work together. Hydro is a Norwegian-based company, headquartered in Norway, but we have in total roughly 8,000 employees around in Europe in 27 countries. And the products we produce range from metal production to aluminum parts for cars, windows, and cans. I will in this presentation use aluminum as a case for transformation to a greener economy and how it can be financed and supported by political decisions. Why is aluminium the metal that grows fastest now? It's because of its properties, it's lightweight, and that it's totally recyclable. Yes, it takes a lot of energy to produce aluminium first time. So low carbon energy mix is very important, and we really support the transition in Europe in that direction. 30 to 40% of the total cost is actually power cost when you produce aluminium first time. But after you have done it first time, the rest of the accounting is purely positive from a climate perspective. Cars get lighter and save fuel. Buildings are getting more energy efficient. And we can recycle the metal forever and without thousands of times without losing its properties and using only 5% of the energy each time. So aluminium, in fact, creates a better climate footprint than other materials over the life cycle. It's part, the European aluminium industry is part of greening of the society, and the industry can help solve the climate challenge. Actually, Hydro is the first company in our sector has a strategy to be carbon neutral by 2020, not by buying papers, but actually through greening our business portfolio as we go forward. Let me take 3 examples of what we have done historically, and then I will look forward. First, next year, we will start up a pilot line for aluminium production in Norway. We invest 500 million euro. It's a technology that will enable us to produce aluminium with the world's highest energy efficiency and the smallest CO2 footprint. Actually, we save 15 to 20% of the energy consumption compared to the global average. The risk was shared with the Norwegian public fund, Enova, that supports energy and climate-related technology. Later, what we get out of this pilot will be used for spin-offs in other smelters in Norway and in Europe. Second, over the last 2 years, we have invested close to 70 million euro in recycling facilities in the European Union. These are not supported by the public financially, but here again, the framework is so critical, as we have heard before today. It's really that we have framework that supports effective systems for circular economy and that sorting of products at the end of life is profitable. Thirdly, in 1994, we invested in a smelter here in Slovakia, together with a local company and EBRD. EBRD was really the enabler for this project. Without EBRD, no investment. The risk was simply too high, the framework were too uncertain. We brought with us the technology from Norway, and the results are impressive. Fluoride emissions from the operations were reduced by 93% from 95 to 96 and have stayed low, and emission of tar was reduced by 96%. We have done it before. Environmental challenges earlier was something else, now it's the climate, we have done it before. And Slovalco is still a top-performing smelter. So these are 3 examples of how it's so important with both support from financial institutions and from the public sector and the framework. Let me turn to the future, and this is important, it's also been named earlier. We have a favorable situation in Europe with advanced customers. They demand a lot from us, which is good. We have politicians that have set the toughest standards. Therefore, Europe has one of the cleanest and most advanced aluminium industries. Climate strategy, yes. More than enough papers and visions. And financial tools, actually, yes. It's not the challenge to finance it, but of course you can always combine better. But then comes the dilemma. On the one hand, politicians want to enhance industry development and support it with R&D and financial measures and innovation. On the other hand, other climate tools like the ETS can knock the energy-intensive industry out as profitable business, and then this business will move to China or other places. That is what we call carbon leakage. That's the reason why the European Union...
Okay, Arvid, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say your time's up before we get into carbon leakage.
Yep, but that is what is now important, that we get a solution for that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and panel, I'm going to start with a very quick and hopefully provocative question. So we've heard that you need to divest from the carbon in your portfolio. So these investment funds have risk, in effect, in their portfolio. So could failing to address that risk trigger another financial crisis? Does climate change pose a systemic risk to the financial system? Well, you look like you're nodding.
Yes.
Yes? And if so, what should we do about it? Annie?
Well, you asked a few questions in one there. So in terms of does climate change pose a systemic risk? I think the answer is yes, and I think that, but what I would add to that is we don't know exactly what that risk will be. And focusing exclusively on carbon intensity as a measure of that, I think is misguided. I think it's an indicator, a proxy for it, as you could say. But as Mr. Tamaki spoke about at the beginning here, the data that we have on carbon emissions is still not of the quality that it forms a solid basis for that kind of decision making.
Now, I mean, you mentioned the data there, and I remember, Isla, that you wanted to talk a little bit about reporting and monitoring. So if there's something you want to add to that, now would be a fantastic time.
Sure. So that...
Sorry, I was speaking to
Isla. Sorry.
Well, yes, I was talking more about reporting for green bonds, but I think the same reporting goes on everywhere. It's the same question. So, first of all, it's a very complex field, and there's plenty of work going on already, but it's certainly not something where one should be expecting results overnight. Just as I told you that the 11 IFIs who work together to put out a reporting format for renewable energy and energy efficiency impacts, this took 6 months maybe. It's only 2 sectors. And it's also, although we all agreed on a format how to report this, but if you look at EIB's numbers and EBRD's numbers and the World Bank's numbers, they're not comparable. So we have agreed on the format of reporting, but we haven't agreed yet on the harmonized assessment because we all have different baseline assumptions. To put it very clearly, if we finance together a solar farm, let's say in the middle of Africa, we think that there are X numbers of sunny days in that spot per year. The second and third finance providers think that there's a different number of sunny days in that spot of the world, and hence we all get different carbon numbers.
I mean, actually, Commissioner, I'm going to come to you. I mean, is there even an agreed definition at EU level of what a green investment is?
I think The very basic definition is an investment which is supporting a sustainable economy. We have to understand that when we talk about a future green economy, meaning that any economy which is not sustainable has got a very short expiry date on it. And this is a bigger risk, I think, when we talk about divesting. Yes, divesting from the old economy and investing into the new economy, there's always this small risk. But I think the risk is much, much bigger in getting stuck in the old economy and not reading the signs on the walls that not we need to change, we are changing. And we're talking about green finance. I think we should also be talking about greening finance, because green finance is financing green project. Greening finance meaning that we have to make certain that any project which is being financed is a sustainable project.
And I'll just come to you, Arvid, and to you, Frida. I mean, but, you know, come on, this is all well and good, but you're in business. People care about short-term return. Let's get the money in the bank, don't they?
No, I think that our investments are more and more occupied with the long-term sustainable platform that we have as a business.
But there are short-term investors.
Yeah,
There's
but I think we, but
short-term
just
investors.
as we have heard here, there are more and more large investors that really focus on, is this a sustainable business platform? And that is what we talk with our investors about, is really the carbon footprint, the long-term strategy. And I think that there will always be someone who's in for the short. But as a responsible company, we have to take the long perspective, and that is important.
Okay, so yes, please come in.
I'd like to go back to your initial question about whether or not the banks understand the risks and vulnerabilities for their clients in terms of, you know, climate change. At EBRD, when we engage with local commercial banks, we complement our funding with capacity building programs, and we are trying to help these banks to understand what risks and what vulnerabilities their portfolio face in terms of climate change. And we are also giving them support, like training loan officers to understand the benefits of investing in energy efficiency, so they can then sell this concept to their clients. So I think here we are trying to achieve some kind of transformational impact, working with the local banks to sell products to their clients.
Okay, and Frida and Annie, I mean, you know, you both work for pension funds. I mean, are the returns there, basically, with these green investments? Are the returns big enough, the rate of return big enough in order to match the liabilities of the funds, or are we not there yet?
Well, I think I will echo KLP. We don't know. So what we see, we do in risk analysis, we see that maybe what we call linear, or we call carbon intensive, these risks will go up. And the revenues, well, we can see, and everything, when we talk about circular economy, we cannot invest yet in circular economy. It's so little, and it's mainly some small companies are trying to get their production and the value chain a little bit more circular. So it's still not there. So what is our biggest impact now is looking where, and that's maybe what the Commissioner means with green finance, is where do we hinder these kind of developments, and where did we when we started, we thought, well, maybe we should have circular loans or circular investment portfolios, and in the end it's just the same loan and it's the same investing, and the thing we should need to change, and that is in the front office. I agree with you. So it's not in the CSR department or at the fund manager. It's in the front office of the bank, for instance, that the risk assessment still is based on linear principles.
But this isn't mainstreamed into everyday practice. I mean, how many times do you hear, you know, I don't know, is climate risk a part of standard due diligence of an investment procedure? Yes, sorry, I should have said Annie, yes.
Sorry, I don't want to talk out of turn again.
Yeah, no.
So, well, I should distinguish between the types of investments we make. The vast majority of KLP's assets are invested passively in index funds. So by definition, you're not making that assessment beforehand because you're not picking out the winners and the losers. We do the divestment kind of on the back end with that. So it's a bit of a different process. When you're talking about more type of impact investments, like the types of investments I outlined with Norfund on renewable energy capacity, There, we demand the same kind of return criteria that we would with other projects, and we are definitely looking at the climate impact. However, we accept a higher level of risk than we would otherwise, and both in terms of financial risk and also ESG risk generally, because these are in regions where it can be more challenging with respect to labor rights and anti-corruption and all these other things that we're trying to address.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go to the audience for our first question. Who wants to be brave and ask the first question? Yes, you, sir. Please stand up, introduce yourself, and ask your question. I think one of our hostesses comes bearing a microphone.
Thank you. My name is Henri Saint-Brice from Suez. I would like just to echo a question that was on the screen, which says the green economy is the future, but in real life, the historically low oil and steel prices today are killing the recycling industries. How do we solve this? And I think you, Mr. Vela, you very rightly mentioned the push and pull measures at the beginning of your speech, and how could we get the circular economy package go in that direction?
Yes, I think what was asked is a fact. It is true that oil prices at the moment are, I wouldn't say killing recycling and killing the circular economy, but they are giving it a very hard time. The only comment that I would like to make is, why are they giving it hard time? Because at times it's much cheaper to buy virgin plastic than to buy recycled plastic granules, for example. But my comment is that, first of all, these very low prices, oil prices, are not a long-term trend, but they are dips in the price structure. And secondly, I think we have to stop looking at values and prices only in financial terms. Yes, it could be financially or monetarily cheaper to buy oil or virgin plastic material, but let's not forget that there is the environmental cost as well. So when you add up the environmental cost with the monetary cost, then the total cost is much higher, that of oil, over the circular economy. And I would like to add also one comment about investing in the circular economy. Today, we know that a good number of industries have already recognized the benefits, the economic benefits, not just the environmental benefits of circular economy, and they have invested in circular economy ages ago, I would say, 5, 10 years ago. Today, we have projects that have invested and that are reaping the benefits of their own micro-circular economy within their industries. Because they saw an economic benefit, they didn't have to wait for any circular economy legislation coming from the European Union or
Okay,
anywhere else.
thank you, Commissioner. We're going to go to Mr. Tamaki, and then we'll go to Arvid, and then I think we'll come back to you, the audience.
One of the potential positive impact, positive effect of lower oil prices for the policymaker is, as you know, we have been advocating carbon pricing and eliminating subsidy on fossil fuels. The lower price provides us with a quite good opportunity to eliminate subsidies for the poor and introducing the new taxation, new burden on oil products. So we should encourage governments to take a brave action to this.
But are any national governments removing their oil subsidies?
No, but some Asian countries, for example, Indonesia, Indonesia has made use of this opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Arvid.
Yeah, there was just a comment to this, whether that the fact that we're now low in the cycle, whether that is encouraging or not encouraging recycling. Actually, I would say that it's encouraged recycling, because recycling is normally less capital intensive than the primary production. So in bad times, you should really try to invest in something where there's low capital involved. And we see that in aluminium, that actually is more investment going into that circular economy now than before. And there's really a job to do in Europe here, because we are shipping 1 million ton of scrap to China still. And that is a business that should be kept in Norway. So I also encourage you to be more positive to look into financing this from your point of view. I think it's a business that will grow.
Okay, Commissioner, I think you wanted to come back quickly, and then we'll just get another question.
I think just to add to what my colleague was saying, let's take aluminium. It is a fact, and please correct me if I am wrong, that working with virgin aluminium is 10 times more costlier in energy terms than working with recycled aluminium.
20 times.
20 times.
Yes.
So whatever the price of the oil, whether it's high or low, it's still 20 times cheaper to work with recycled aluminium than it is to work with virgin aluminium.
So why doesn't everyone just use recycled aluminium?
Because almost all of it is already used. In Europe, somewhere between 70 and 90% of the metal is recycled already. So there is, but we can do more what I call urban mining.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, back over to you. Who'd like to ask a question? Were you scratching your head, sir? Yes, you were. That's unfortunate. Yes, Fred.
It's Frédéric Simon from YourActive.com. I wanted to come back to Mrs. Bersago. You said it was misguided to focus entirely on CO2, so I was wondering whether you could expand on that and how you're putting this into practice at KPL.
Yeah, let me just clarify that. I didn't say it was misguided to focus on CO2. I said it was misguided to focus exclusively on carbon emissions. And the reason for that is so much of it is looking at the carbon emission intensity, and that's often a very blunt measure for a lot of industries to try to understand whether they're using the levers that are available to them in order to adapt to a green economy. And an example of this is companies where their Scope 1 emissions, because that's what we're usually talking about in terms of intensity, are relatively high, but where they provide their products lead to lower emissions on the back end, Scope 3 for their customers. Because what we're really interested about is whether they have a business model that's going to survive in the future and reduce emissions, regardless of where in the value chain that occurs. And then the second point of that is just the problems that we still have with data. KLP is a partner to CDP in Norway, as we think it's really important that the quality of the data improves, and we encourage companies to report it, but it's still not nearly as reliable as accounting data, which we all know is highly fudgeable as well. So until that comes up to a level that's very reliable in that sense, we feel that it wouldn't be prudent to use that as the sole basis for an investment criteria.
Okay. Anyone else with a question? Yes, you, sir, with the beard, and then we'll come to you, sir.
Well, thank you. I'm Dan Oleshinsky from Center for Sustainable Alternatives NGO from Slovakia. So coming back to the discussion to low price, high green price. Question is same. If you see that we are ready for bring the external cost methodology into the price, if you as a potentially green investor will welcome if we do have something like global green tax or something like that, and then if the Commission and OECD are ready to issue the methodology for counting the external cost, because external cost, there's not only CO2. Because from my point of view as a consumer, it's a question of price if I'm coming to shop. And if still the plastic materials from virgin plastic is 2 times cheaper than recycled plastic materials, then there is have to be high motivation to buy the more expensive good. So once more, the question to external cost, including to the price, if the Commission is ready to start the methodology for including this something like EU tax and OECD as well, and you as an investor, if you will welcome these mechanisms.
Okay, well, I think we can sum that up broadly by saying, is the Commission and the OECD, are you looking at anything to make consumers pay the true cost of the products? And can anything be done on that? And whether or not that's something that the investment community would support. So we'll begin with you, Commissioner, and then...
I see, again, not that I want to go into the details of pricing and so on. When we talk about oil prices, first of all, very low oil prices might be an incentive to divest in the production of oil. So that is also, I think, we have to take into consideration. But then low prices generates low-priced materials like plastic. As I said, I don't see that this is a long-term thing. Things are happening very rapidly, and things, when they dip, prices dip, they stay at a low for, I don't know, a number of weeks, but certainly not months and years. So I don't see this as a major problem. There might be a temporary, yes, hit back on the circular economy where plastic is concerned, because circular economy is not just about plastic material. We're talking about paper, glass, building material, circular economy in water. So that is hitting one sector of the whole circular economy, and it's hitting it only temporarily, I think.
Okay, Mr. Tomak, if you could be quick, because we're in the closing minutes and I want to fit in as many questions as quickly as possible.
There are many externalities, positive and negative. And we cannot internalize pricing everything. But pricing the emission, CO2 emission, is quite specific and possible. And the point is to send a signal to the whole society and the industry. What is the next step to do? If pricing could eliminate some existing industries, it may cause cost, and it may cause some consumers. But this is the right way to select the future industry structure. So in that sense, this is a quite essential pricing process, and the investors should welcome. The remaining issue is how to ensure the right methodology and the international comparability.
Okay, very quickly.
Yeah, very quick. Well, I agree. And what do investors think? They think that's a better level playing field. And then you see that the carbon intensive or the plastic intensive using virgin feedstock, the price will go up and the other price will go down. So they will be more attractive to invest in. That's a very short and simple answer.
Okay, panelists, we're going to take the gentleman over there's question, but I'm also going to give you an advance warning. Once we've taken his question and we've answered it, I'm going to ask each of you a question. And the question is, are we getting a strong enough market signal from all of this talk about the green economy, from Paris and everything else, to change investment behavior for good? And if not, what more do investors need to convince them to put their money where their mouth is? So if you could have a think about that. And yes, sir, there you are. If I'm correct, I think it's this gentleman from the European Environment Agency.
Thank you for covering that part. Have you heard of the concept green infrastructure that was mentioned in session 1, and do you invest in it?
And who's that directed to, please?
Mainly the investment people.
Okay. Please.
Yes, and we were one of the founders of an organization called GRASB, and that's a real estate organization that collects data and indicators for what is green infrastructure and real estate and what's not.
Okay, yes, Annie?
Yes, first of all, I'd point to the Norfund investments that I had referred to earlier, but also KLP has been for many years a significant investor in hydropower in Norway. And this was always more because of the kind of the return risk profile than that we have to do something very green. But you know, this is something that comes very naturally to us.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm painfully aware that there are a few questions on the app which we haven't had a chance to ask yet, for which I apologize, but there will be coffee in less than 5 minutes through there. So please, don't be shy. Approach our panelists. They'll be glad, I'm sure, to answer your questions.
Definitely.
Sorry to ruin your coffee break in that way, but okay. Where were we? Yes. Are we sending out a strong enough market signal to investors, Arvid?
I think your question was a little bit broader, so I would say that I don't think the market signals are strong enough, but the combined effect of changing consumer attitude investor attitude, banks' attitude, and politicians' more and more pressure. All that leads us in the direction we want to go to a greener economy. And I think we are on the right way. We just have to see if the speed is high enough.
Okay.
Well, very short, put your policy where your mouth is. And because the organization, the companies who are working, for instance, in circular economy or low carbon intense industries, they have problems now. And then it's harder for us to invest in them.
Okay, thank you. Stefania?
As I said, at EBRD, we have targets, and we have targets for bankers, we have targets for our country offices to invest in green energy. So I think we are doing this, and we are always trying to combine policy dialogue with investment support, with technical assistance and capacity building to make these investments happen.
Thank you. Annie, surely the fact we're even having this event means not enough's been done.
I would say a provocative question deserves a provocative answer. And if I interpreted what you ask as should politicians be doing more to kind of create market signals for investors, I would say it's actually the reverse that's been happening to a large extent, that investors have really been ahead of the politicians in this. I know that I should know my audience here, but I think for us it's kind of like welcome to the party. And we see that implementing the Paris Agreement and creating a carbon price that bites, these are the kind of the key factors that are going to contribute to a more efficient transformation to a green economy.
Okay, I mean, surely the European Investment Bank was there first, wasn't it?
Well, perhaps yes, but I'm more thinking of investors in the private sector. I mean, we invest obviously in green infrastructure and green pretty much everything. But I agree with the previous speaker that this is the investor space. I'm talking about the private sector investors and semi-public sector investors. They have moved to this space already some time ago and are moving and are developing things. I just feel when I'm talking to different stakeholders, be it investors, be it the public sector, be it the authorities, that there's so many demands at the moment that the green bond industry has to do this, has to do that, that it's a bit this, I feel sometimes like misquoting John F. Kennedy, don't ask what the green bond market can do for you, but what you can do for the green bond market, because there's so many things to do and which need to be done, but also we have to do it while we are already progressing, because otherwise, if we wait for everything to be in place and to be perfect, we will be at +6 degree climate already.
And Commissioner, very interested for your answer also to talk a little bit about how you're trying to create these new markets in the circular economy.
Yes, I will start by saying that unfortunately, and we have to say that investment hardly looked very positively at environment. This was a long time ago. Recently, investors are looking at the fact that environmental challenges are giving us economic opportunities. And I think that is the new way of looking at it. There was a time when the environmental community and the investment community, I wouldn't say one was the antithesis of the other, but at times they didn't see the fact that they could collaborate and cooperate. Today, I think we can safely say that the environmental community needs the investment community as much as the investment community needs the environmental community.
It's an interesting point. Mr. Tamaki, when will green investment become just investment?
The precondition to become so is the government's policies, stability and predictability. So if governments should set up on a very stable framework, policy framework, green investment will become investment. Another point is, we are discussing in Europe, that if you go to, for example, Southeast Asia, very few discussion about this. So we see a quite serious regional difference between Europe and Southeast Asia and Latin America. So we have to address this.
Thank you very much. Some last pieces of housekeeping, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, coffee is there. One of the parallel sessions is on this floor. It will begin at 3:30 sharp. On the 6th floor, there is another parallel session. So make your choice and head up to the 6th floor. You can either take the lift or the stairs. Your hostesses will guide you. I would like to thank our keynote speakers, our wonderful panelists, and of course you for your questions and your attention. Thank you very much.